As many of you know, I have for many years had a great deal of interest in herpetology, that is studying reptiles and amphibians, and a good part of that includes doing my part to help educate the public about these animals and why we should even bother to appreciate them. Probably more than any other reptile, I think you'll agree that venomous snakes have always been at the top of the list of animals to fear and consider expendable, at least in the public's view. But I hope to do my part to help change that often held view. My guest today is Carl Person. He's a venom researcher at Loma Linda University in Southern California. He does a great deal of research on rattlesnake speciation, but he also does regular public education programs, including live venomous snake presentations, where he talks about arguably the most exciting aspect of venom research right now, that being venom and human medicine. Venom research is opening doors to creating many new life-saving medications, making venomous snakes to be seen as sources of hope and arguably saving more lives than they are taking. I spoke with Carl over the computer, so you'll hear the humming of his computer fan in the background, just to give you a heads up on what that noise is. Other than that, please enjoy this fascinating talk with Carl Person on reptile venom and human medicine. Enjoy. All right, on the phone now I have Carl Person. Carl, thank you for being here to talk with me today. How are you doing?
Oh, real good. Thank you for having me.
All right, now some people may not have ever heard of you or know about your work. What is it that you do?
Well, my primary work is rattlesnake speciation. That's what I'm really interested in. On the side, I worked a little bit with venom and medicine. We did a brain injury study using Southern Pacific rattlesnake venom, and then later they switched to Western Diamondback for some unknown reason. And I've done some behavior studies and, just different things.
Oh, that's really interesting. You mentioned your research on venomous snakes. You do a little bit of work with venom. I've seen some of your presentations. You do a really good talk on venom research and medicines that are used from or created from that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, the reason I go into that so much, other than my own interest, is that a lot of times when you talk about conservation of a particular species, especially if it's dangerous, people might want to think, well, okay, yeah, it has its place in ecology, but gopher snakes eat rodents too. What do we need those for?
Right.
But realizing that the venom glands of these animals hold a very rich protein biodiversity that in a lot of instances can be converted to a very beneficial medicine is definitely something that is going to be more in line with, oh, that's a good reason to keep them, right?
Right.
If you think about captopril, in 1981 it got FDA approval. And it's an ACE inhibitor. In other words, what it does is it prevents blood clots. It's used a lot for people even with kidney failure or kidney problems due to diabetes. It's used in heart patients. It's used for different things. And millions of people every year use this medicine, have no idea it came from a lance-headed viper in South America, Bothrops gerarica. And what happened is, that's a direct result. So millions of people's lives are saved because of that. But what they don't realize is that because those venom peptides are they're not peptides, they're venom proteins. Peptides are 44 amino acids and over that we call them proteins. But they're so complicated that you can't reproduce those in the laboratory. Exactly what part of it is doing this? And what people don't realize is that completely revolutionized the way all pharmaceuticals are made. We concentrate now on how do we get it to do this. So inadvertently, it's going to make the drug safer. They're more targeted, so less side effects, and they're more accurate, better results. So using that venom to medicine changed everything and saved millions of lives directly, but indirectly, probably billions.
Right, right. So you mentioned one of those medicines, was it the captopril?
Mm-hmm.
What now? What other sort of medicines can be developed or have been developed through venom research?
Well, if you have unstable angina, it's a heart problem.
Yeah.
You might be getting integralin. That comes from the pygmy rattlesnake in Florida. They have echistatin from the saw-scaled viper in the Middle East. That's used for deep thrombosis. That's very painful blood clots, usually in the legs. But more interesting than that, if you think about this one, breast cancer is a huge problem worldwide. Turns out that the copperhead from the eastern United States, one of the qualities of its venom is that it prevents cancerous cell adhesion to your extracellular matrix. In other words, it needs to form a tumor and grow, it has to hook up and have a blood supply. If it's prevented from doing that, it dies. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Can you imagine what that'll mean? They're working on it now, but I mean, that's astounding.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, and it sounds like there's lots of research being done. I understand there's some stuff with what's it, beaded lizard or Gila monster venom, and use for diabetes too.
Well, yeah. What happened was some scientists said, I wonder, think about a Gila monster's life cycle. In the spring, they come out. There's lots of baby birds and or bird eggs and stuff they eat. They feed themselves fat. Then it gets real hot and dry, and they estivate. Then they come out in rainy season. They gorge again. Then they've got winter to deal with. Well, how are you keeping your blood sugar stable? Well, it turns out they have a special property in there that circulates through extendin that keeps it stable. So they came up with the Byetta based on that to keep blood sugar stable so you don't have the ups and downs.
Right, and that's something that's in use now.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, well, you could see why these sort of animals could be seen more in a conservation mindset to the general public, like you said before, whereas before people thought of snakes as rodent control, but they might see venomous snakes as something more that they can, part with, since those other non-venomous snakes are there too. But if they look at them as life-saving type of animals, I mean, maybe not since the ancient Greeks they saw snakes as healers, but it seems like that's the case now. It's really interesting. I mean, people usually think of venomous snakes as symbols of death, and people around the world, of course, are bitten by venomous snakes, and some people die from it every year. So do you think now we're at a point where we see more people lives being saved on a daily basis than people are being killed by these snakes, you think?
That's it's hard to speculate that because you have some problems. In my show, I often use a black Pakistan cobra, which you've seen.
Yeah.
And where he's from, the area is very poor, very underdeveloped. And, garbage is close by. And, they come up for the rodents and people get bitten. Especially at night, going, say, to an outhouse or something.
Yeah.
Well, anti-venom is very hard to get. And for the black Pakistan cobra, the regular Thai Red Cross doesn't work all that, the Asian cobra doesn't work all that well. And in fact, at Loma Linda, we had a group come by, visit Bill and I, to talk about it. And they're wanting to develop something, and they need it cheap. In Papua New Guinea, you have the version of the coastal taipan, the Papuan taipan, and people die. the antivenom is scarce. So you have a problem there. And nobody knows, I don't think, really how many people die versus how many are saved. But my guess, and it is a guess, but my guess would be that more people's lives are saved just by the one medication, captopril, than are ever killed per year by snakes.
Well, that's really interesting,
Never
especially
mind all the other medicines.
yeah. And once that's digested by the general public, who knows when, it should be interesting. You mentioned a little bit more of your research. Were you talking about venom and brain, in the brain?
Yeah, well, what happened was we were wondering, if you need brain surgery, there are two things that are really dangerous. One is swelling, and the other, of course, is bleeding, edema. Well, a lot of the modern techniques are looking at upregulating the system. In other words, preparing the system for the disaster so that when it hits, it's already ready. Everything's in place. So, what a graduate student there with us was doing was injecting rodents, and then a few days later doing brain surgery. Well, we had a 1% reduction, and you say, well, 1%, who cares?
Yeah, it's pretty minimal.
In your brain case, 1% is huge.
All right.
And as far as the bleeding, very reduced. So, in the stats, the paper is published. I forgot what we called it, but anyway, the point is that there's value in venom, a lot of value.
No, that's really interesting, and something that we should continue to push to the public. So it's really great that you were able to talk a little bit about that. Is there anything else you want to say if you were talking to the public about these animals, that would help them understand kind of the work you're doing and where it's headed a little better?
Well, what I would tell people really is not so much about me personally, but worldwide, every day a new paper comes out, new properties of venoms, new drug interests. It's huge. I mean, I am telling you, per year, I can't even keep up with it. And it's important for us to realize that, these animals do have the potential downside, but the upside is there too. And I might not appreciate dying because that species was wiped out for a medicine that could have been derived.
Right, that's really amazing, and it'll be interesting to see what's developed in the future from this research. Carl Person from Loma Linda University, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me a little bit today. And
well, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
No, it's great. Anytime we can talk to people about putting these snakes in a positive light. And plus the research is really interesting and amazing, and it should be interesting for anybody. Carl, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Edgar.
You have a good night.
You too, my friend.
That was Carl Person, venom researcher at Loma Linda University. If you enjoyed this episode of the Edgar Ortega Radio Show, please click on the subscribe button and be sure to catch all of my interviews as they're uploaded, and be sure to comment below. We should have lots of great herpetological topics, as well as many other topics to come. Once again, thank you for listening to the Edgar Ortega Radio Show.